Welcome, everyone, to Pursuing Justice. My name is Harriet Hendel, and I certainly hope that last time you were listening to our series, we try to pick a theme each month, and this time we have a guest, Kenneth Hartman, with us. He was with us last time, and his daughter will be with us the next time. So Ken spent 38 years in prison on a sentence of life without parole, and that's what we are talking about. He was in California, and thanks to Governor Brown, he was released almost 3 years ago in December of this year. So we spoke about the issue of life without parole and how it really robs people of hope and redemption. And we also talked about other countries and how few of them have a sentence as harsh as life without parole. So today, we want to talk a little bit about Ken's writing. He has authored 2 books, and he'll tell us a little bit more about that. Ken, welcome back to Pursuing Justice.
I'm happy to be back, Harriet. Thank you for inviting me again.
Great. All right. So we talked about programs that might have been a source of support. There are some prisons that I know about that have a writing program. One of those prisons happens to be in Connecticut, and it is run by the author Wally Lamb, who comes in and does a writing workshop. Do you know of any other prisons that do something like that?
I actually do, and I actually know very well Wally Lamb's program, and I've read some of the works that have been published out of that program, which are just absolutely fantastic. I mean, it's really one of the most impressive programs I've ever heard of, frankly. Yeah, there's programs in New York State. There's programs in writing programs are not that uncommon in prisons, actually.
That's great. And why do you feel a creative writing program is beneficial for the people who take it, the inmates?
Sure. Yeah, I think probably from my perspective, the biggest positive about a writing program is I think that there's enormous opportunity for people to explore their own feelings, to explore their own lives. I think it's extraordinarily cathartic in the classic sense of the word. It's a way to get things out of you that are troubling you, that are causing you pain and distress, and it's a way to explore your own life and explore yourself. So, as someone who's done quite a bit of writing myself, I attribute much of my, quote unquote rehabilitation to writing.
Now, did you know that you had this ability to write?
No, I really did not. And in fact, it's sort of looking back on it, it's sort of a kind of a funny thing in some ways. But my former wife, Aaliyah's mother, and I believe you're going to talk to Aaliyah at some point.
We are.
Her name was Anita, and she used to tell me all the time, "Oh, you should be a writer. You write the most beautiful letters," And I would always just kind of poo-poo it, and I'm not going to be a writer. I mean, I never even graduated from high school. How am I going to be a writer? And after one of my trips to the hole for political activities, I got out of the hole. I did not have a job. I was on a different facility. I had nothing to do, and I noticed a flyer that said there was a creative writing class being taught through the UCLA Extension Program, University of California, Los Angeles Extension Program. And I thought, why not? It's something to do. And I signed up for it. And I met a man named David Scott Milton, who was an absolutely spectacular writer and was a teacher at the film school at UCLA and USC. We became very good friends as years went on, and I got to see him when I got out, I'm happy to say, although he has since passed away. But the first thing I wrote was basically a public apology to the city of Long Beach for what I had done to put myself in prison. and they published it. And it took up like half the page of the Sunday paper in the opinion section. And I thought, well, I kind of enjoy writing, and I began writing, and I haven't really stopped since then. That was 1992, so that's when I started writing.
Wow, that's incredible. Now, there is a prison writing contest under the umbrella of PEN America, which is called Poets, it stands for Poets, Essayists, and Novelists. And that is a wonderful outlet for people in prison to submit either a novel, a play, a story, a memoir, or a poem. And they give cash prizes. They're not huge, but it's recognition across the nation that you have won this writing contest, and it's been going on since 1971. So I thought I would mention that. Did you ever submit anything to PEN, or did you not know about them?
I did not ever submit anything to PEN. I did know about them. I did use their How to Do a Writing Class in Prison publication to do a writing class in prison. When I taught a writing class in prison for years. I never did. And I'll be honest with you, fundamentally, I made a decision pretty early on that I wanted to write to the general public. And I didn't want to write to people who already agreed with me. And I kind of said, I think I'm just going to try to write for general publication magazines and newspapers, which I did. And that was kind of my focus. I actually did never apply them. They are a fabulous program, and they do great work. No question about that.
They certainly do. They certainly do. And you wrote Mother California. When was that published, and how do you get a book published when you're sitting behind bars?
Right. So the book was published in 2008. I began writing it in 2007, late 2006, I suppose. It was published by Atlas and Company in New York. The publisher's name was James Atlas, who was a fairly well-known man in the literary community, who I also got a chance to see when I got out, although he too has passed away since then. But I just wrote the book, and I sent it out to him as a manuscript, and they transcribed it and did the editing on it and whatnot. And we went back and forth for about a year, making editorial changes and rewrites and things like that. And then they published it. Atlas and Company published it. And it is one of these things. It is not illegal to write or to publish a book when you're in prison, contrary to some people's ideas. It's not illegal.
And what about the money that comes from the purchase of the book? Is there that as a factor? Are you permitted to receive money from the sale of the book?
Well, yeah, this is a really complicated subject, and I know that that you're actually, I believe, based in New York State,
right?
And it's a really big issue in New York State. It goes all the way back to the Son of Sam case.
That I remember.
Sure, and there are laws in many states that are often referred to as Son of Sam laws. The man who went by the nickname Son of Sam received a fairly large amount of money to publish his story. People were quite outraged by that, and laws were passed all around the country that said you cannot profit off of your crime, which is the way it is framed. The United States Supreme Court has struck down those laws every single time that they've been challenged up to the U.S. Supreme Court, because you do not lose your First Amendment rights when you go to prison, regardless of whether people think you should or not. You literally don't. And I was paid in advance for the book, and I did receive the money, and it wasn't a giant amount of money, and the book was unfortunately not a giant. Wasn't a bestseller or anything. I wish it would have been. And anyone who happens to be listening to this podcast, feel free to read it and tell all your friends. But it is still in print. Atlas and Company went out of business, and the book is now in print and can be purchased through Amazon.
Right. It can be purchased through a wonderful company that I like. It's called Abe, ABE, Abe Books, and also on eBay because I just bought it for a couple of people who are in prison. I thought they'd like to read it. So yes, it definitely is available. Now let's move to a little different subject. At the last time we spoke, we just barely talked about the concept of conjugal visits in prison. And you can tell us more about how, I don't actually know, how many prisons in the country permit visits for a family for a few days on the grounds of the prison.
Very few, actually.
Very few.
New York State is one of the states that does allow that. California does. There are, and again, I mean, to be honest with you, I don't know the exact number today. I knew more about that years ago, but I would be willing to guess it's probably less than 10% of the states, something like that. It's probably 5 or 6, maybe 7 states.
And in your prison, they had permitted that, but then what happened to the country?
Well, yeah. Well, they had conjugal visits since the 70s. Ronald Reagan was the governor when they were brought in, when California was on a kind of a rehabilitation push. And they lasted until the late 90s for people who were sentenced to life. In 1996, all life sentenced prisoners and several other classifications of prisoners were barred from receiving what they were called in California family visits. They were not merely conjugal visits. Yeah, you could visit with your children, you could visit with your mother and father, your brothers and sisters. They were for all immediate family members. They were often referred to as conjugal visits to kind of, you know, make it a little more salacious, I guess. But and they were for that too. You know, it wasn't they weren't for that. And I was married in 1987, and I received conjugal visits until 1996, and when they were taken away.
And was there a reason that they took them away from certain classifications of prisoners?
Well, I mean, so they said that people who were serving life terms shouldn't be receiving family visits because they were never going to get out of prison, and it didn't make any sense for them to be maintaining family connections. Literally, they said these things. But I mean, what it was really about, Harriet, was this was the height of the, you know, the get tough years, you know, quote unquote, let's get tough on crime, which in prison meant get tough on people who were in prison and their families and their children, you know, all that. And it was really politics. You know, it was the governor at that time wanted to demonstrate how tough he was on crime, and he ordered the Department of Corrections to cancel family visits for people serving life and several other things.
Yeah, that must have been heartbreaking for so many people, of course, including you. So then you said you got married, and as a result, you and your former wife had a little girl. And
did indeed.
Tell us about that. That was pretty incredible.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was, you know, we had talked about having a child for years, and it was a very complicated thing for someone serving a life term. And my former wife really wanted a child, and ultimately I agreed. Certainly it was a 50-50 proposition. It wasn't like one person made the decision. And you know, she got pregnant with my daughter, and this was in 1995, and Aaliyah was born the day after Christmas.